Good afternoon, Madam Secretary.
Good afternoon.
Jim Christiana from Beaver County. Thanks for being with us, gentlemen, and
Thank you.
Madam Deputy Secretary. Under the Government Works umbrella, I think it's really important that the Department of Revenue provide us, as we're building a budget going forward, the most responsible revenue estimates and projections going forward. And I think in this entire severance tax debate, I think your testimony and conversation with us today is probably going to be the most important, because we're all trying to predict what that revenue estimate is going to be in case Pennsylvania does enact a severance tax. And there's been some inconsistency about what those projections will be. I think last year in February, a 5% severance tax, Governor Wolf said that would bring in $550 million. Then in May, the same 5% would bring in $700 million, and then in September, a 5% severance tax, $1 billion. And then last week in his speech, he said, "I'm proposing a 5% severance tax that is projected to generate more than $1 billion in annual revenues." He didn't talk about the additional rider or addendum. He had never said that. Well, at least I hadn't heard that as the discussion. We're hearing a 5% tax, but what you said was 5% plus, which to me indicates higher than 5%. What is that effective tax rate on current market prices?
I have not calculated it on the current market price, because the market price is quite volatile and changes over time. I believe a calculation that was done by the independent fiscal office and recently published provides a better way to look at the effective tax rate, because it calculates the effective tax rate over the lifetime of a particular well over a 30-year period. And they estimated the effective rate of the West Virginia tax, on which ours is modeled, and which is also 5% plus 4.7 cents, at 5.8% over the lifetime of the well. So I think that's probably the best way to compare to other areas.
And that 4.7 cents is unique to West Virginia, correct? They're the only state in the country with that type of hybrid approach. I think the gentleman testified at the independent fiscal office today that additional 4.7 cents is unique to West Virginia, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I know that there are states that do a volume-based tax and states that do a percentage-based tax. Do you know the answer to that? Okay.
And also, I do believe that West Virginia is getting rid of that in 2018. That is supposed to sunset, which would essentially give us a higher effective rate after that sunset than West Virginia. But that's may happen in 2018, but it is set to expire. My question about the $1 billion theme is that obviously the price of natural gas has a significant effect on the revenue. And when Governor Wolf started the debate in February, the price of gas on Henry Hub was $6. And then when last week, it was just under $3. So the price of gas has dropped over those 11 months, but his revenue estimates have climbed by almost double. Can you maybe explain to the committee what number you are using for a price to estimate that $1 billion?
I'm going to ask Dan to explain that estimate.
I absolutely agree with you that that this market is volatile and the prices jump around quite a bit, but the revenue estimates are based on the publicly available reports from Department of Environmental Protection. They are publishing, I believe on a monthly basis, gas production in the Commonwealth, and then applying a $3.25 price to that gas production. That is a forecast looking forward to 2016, when this tax would be effective. So you would expect production to be higher, and prices will be, I would imagine, higher than where they are today.
The 2016 is important, because as we're building 2015, 2016 budget, revenue estimates and projections for 16-17 budget are not really helpful as we're putting a 12-month plan together. And I think you said a 16-17 budget, the severance tax would bring in, I believe, that $1 billion number. So in this budget, as we're moving forward, do you have a revenue estimate for a severance tax for this year, that or for next fiscal year, not 2 years out? And what is that?
Yeah, the severance tax that's proposed in the budget is one that's effective January 1st of 2016, and then because of delays and when the payments would be made, only $165 million of that comes in the budget year. So if I'm understanding your question, you're saying if it were moved up so it was essentially effective immediately and then we had a full year of revenue in the budget year? No,
I'm just saying if Governor Wolf's plan that he introduced, that he's talked about in his budget, and he said his plan that he proposed would bring in $1 billion of annual revenue. That has nothing to do with the budget that we're trying to craft now. Or it may have $100 million, I think you said, from January to June of next year. So he's talking about $1 billion and has been for 8 months, but has nothing to do with this budget that we're building, correct?
That $1 billion is essentially an annualized basis looking out into the future.
He didn't say that in his budget address, though. He did say $1 billion of annual revenue. And then he said it's not about politics, but and not about ideology. In his statement, he said this is not about politics or ideology, but the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, which in December the Associated Press wrote was the model. They put out a report for his $1 billion severance tax proposal. That same organization was debunked for predicting corporate taxes in 2011. And I'm not here to ask you about that group, but as a revenue secretary, doesn't that give you some reservation that we're using this group's $1 billion number, and the price that we're using is a national price, which clearly is not the Pennsylvania price currently? Does that give you reservations about setting us up for a $1 billion spend number, but then only bringing in $400 or $500 million, depending on the market?
No, we're not using their numbers. We are using numbers that were generated by our research office. Dan told you what they were based on. The forecast of the Henry Hub price has been adjusted to bring it down to Pennsylvania, to the Appalachian Hub price, and that's what we've based our estimate on.
$3.25, and I can understand that, but the governor said he stood by his proposal that was done by this group in December and seems to be very similar. And if anybody looks at the board of directors at that organization, clearly they're ideological and political. And I just don't know why the governor put that in his statement when his model, his plan was based off of their report. One final disagreement I have, or question.
Representative?
Yes, sir.
We're going on about 8 minutes right now, so, it's about 3 minutes over. So if it's a quick statement, go ahead. If not, we got it. If you're looking for an answer.
It is a quick, yes, it is a quick question and answer.
Real quick.
The governor said that in his handout, the Commonwealth is failing to tax this resource, but the Independent Fiscal Office said today that they classify the impact fee as a severance tax. We can disagree on whether or not that's a severance tax, but I do trust their independence. Can you talk about the taxes that these companies are already paying and give us some type of understanding of all the corporate taxes, the impact fee on an annual basis, what these companies are paying in taxes?
The impact fee generates about $225 million on an annual basis, and the corporate taxes and sales taxes paid by both oil and gas drillers amounted to about $19 million last calendar year.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.